Melanie Phillips, British journalist, broadcaster and author who's championed traditional values in the culture war for more than 3 decades. She writes a weekly column for the Times of London, the Jewish News Syndicate. She broadcasts on radio and TV, gives public presentations across the English-speaking world. Her first novel, Legacy, which deals with conflicted Jewish identity, anti-Semitism, and the power of history, was published in 2018, along with her personal and political memoir, Guardian Angel. Her previous books include her 2006 bestseller, Londonistan, about the British establishment's capitulation to Islamist aggression, and The World Turned Upside Down, the global battle over God, truth and power, which was published in 2010. Melanie Phillips.
Thank you very much indeed, Paul. Good evening, everybody. Erev Tov. It's a great pleasure to be here, back at the Begin Centre again. And it's a great pleasure to be invited to discuss Gal's book, which I've read with great enjoyment and interest, and a very valuable addition it is to the unfortunately burgeoning library of books that are being written about the crisis that the Jewish people are facing. The book is a very effective description of the forces that have come together to assault the Jewish people in Israel and in the world after the atrocities of October the 7th. And I think it's absolutely right to cast this, as Gal does, as an assault on Judaism. Apart from anything else, the assault on Israel, if one wants to sort of distinguish it from Judaism, Israel and Judaism, the assault on Israel contains or is characterized by the same characteristics that are unique to anti-Semitism throughout the ages. The use of double standards, the obsession with this particular cause, the blood libels, the imputation that the Jewish people in Israel are uniquely powerful and uniquely evil. These are all the tropes that we're all familiar with, and they have characterized what we've been living through in terms of the West's reaction to October 7 and the war that followed. I don't, however, think it's right to say that I certainly am not frightened that it's going to destroy Judaism. Judaism is eternal, and we are the eternal people, and we have seen off every enemy that has come for us. And it will also not destroy Israel. We're going to win this terrible war, even though we may be in for more terrible things before that happens, but we are certainly going to win it, and I don't think that the same story can be said about the West. So that's by way of kind of general introduction of my thoughts. The question that arises from this book and from thinking about the events of the last terrible year, why has the West collectively attacked Israel and the Jewish people in this way? Now, we don't need to be told. Anti-Semitism is always with us, and none of us, I'm sure, has ever thought that we would ever live in a world where it wasn't so. But nevertheless, we've never seen anything like this, the intensity, the global reach of what we've been living through. So there's a threefold source for this. Gal has briefly alluded to who's doing this, but I would break it down into three discrete sources. One is the far left, the ideological far left. Two are the Islamists, the people from the world of Islam who wish to colonize the world that's not Islamic or not Islamic enough and make it Islamic. And the third category, I would say, are the supporters of Palestinian rights in the West, who are not particularly ideological, but are basically bought into a particular narrative in which Israel is the bad guy, always, and the Palestinians are their victims, always. And I think my remarks are going to really concentrate on this last group, the supporters of the Palestinian rights, not because the far left and the Islamists aren't important, they're absolutely critical, but because I think that the vast majority of people who support Palestinian rights are the people who empower the unholy alliance of the far left and the Islamists. They give them credibility, they give them credence, and they basically say, you may go a little bit far, but basically you're right. So why do they have this point of view of such hostility to Israel and the Jewish people? Well, we know that the narrative in the West for decades has been a narrative of lies about the Palestinian cause, lies about the history of Israel, lies about the present situation of Israel, lies from start to finish about the position of Jews in the Middle East. And unfortunately, this Palestinian cause based on lies is the default position of the left. So I think that that's not really an adequate explanation for what we have been living through. I think something very much darker has been going on. We have to think first of all about the absolutely obsessive nature of this particular campaign. It's not just against Israel. It's not just saying Israel is doing terrible things. Other countries do terrible things. They don't get this kind of attention. It's not just concern or compassion for the Palestinian people. There are plenty of other people who need compassion. And anyway, if you have compassion for the Palestinian people, which we should do, you would say they are the victims of the Hamas, they are the victims of the Palestinian Authority. So it's not compassion, and it's not even anti-Israelism. The tropes that are being expressed are the tropes of the ancient demonization of the Jewish people that we've all heard before, blood libels and so on, conspiracy theory and so on. And the really extraordinary and terrible thing is the omnipresence of this antipathy. It's among all kinds of people. I mean, the reach of it is astounding. And I know most about Britain. And there are people who aren't necessarily political or ideological at all. They are doctors, they are lawyers, they are civil servants, officials, they're charity workers, they're vicars, they're priests, they're health workers, they're social workers. And everywhere you see the Palestine flag. The Palestine flag, so-called, is everywhere, has become a kind of meme of social justice. We see it on lapels. We see it on lampposts. We see it on buildings. We see it baked into cakes. I can't think of any cause where this has happened, where it's become a kind of global thing like this. So why is this obsession unique? And then to help think how strange this is, I would suggest we think a bit more about what we've all seen, and I'm sure recall in horror at, the images that were so conspicuous in the early months of the war and are still happening, of people tearing down the posters of the hostages. Now, it takes a special kind of psychopathology to tear down a poster of a woman, a baby, an old person who has been captured and is being tortured and starved and raped and all the rest of it. And when you look at the video pictures of the people who were doing the tearing down, their faces were contorted with rage. Now what is this? I mean, how on earth does one explain this? It is absolutely bizarre. So I would like to suggest make a few suggestions about this. I would say that the fury and the obsession and the rage are because for a certain type of person, they simply cannot stand, they really cannot stand any challenge to a particular narrative. And that narrative is that Israel is the bad guy and the Palestinian Arabs are the good guys, that Israel oppresses the Palestinian Arabs. And they cannot therefore acknowledge that Israelis or Jews have been the victims of those same Palestinian Arabs whom they have supported. And not just victims, but victims of those Palestinian Arabs who have carried out acts of unimaginable barbarity and savagery and depravity. Not just killing, not just kidnapping, but doing things to those Jews because they were Jews, and Israelis and even non-Israelis, but basically it's against the Jewish people, quite explicitly so, of extraordinary sadism. I don't need to tell you the details, but the fact is that if you are somebody of a particular ideological bent, and you have supported the Palestinian Arabs all your life, and you have basically not encountered or acknowledged anything to suggest that they are anything other than victims, and are therefore kind of holy people, because they're victims, they cannot do anything bad. Suddenly you find that they have done the worst possible things that a human being could do to another human being. They have been dehumanized. They have been dehumanized and have dehumanized others. What does that make you, the person of conscience who has supported those Palestinian Arabs? It makes you an accomplice to evil. It makes you having supported evil. Because for people who support the Palestinian cause, it's not simply a cause like they once supported apartheid, they once supported South African, black people in South Africa against apartheid, or they once supported, I don't know, Irish nationalism against, they supported the IRA, the Irish Republican Army, against Britain. It's not that sort of cause. This is a cause by which they set their personal moral clock. They identify themselves as moral beings because they support this cause. And so they cannot admit any challenge to it because of the fear that if they were to say, oh yeah, they did actually do these terrible things, the Hamas, yes, I agree, it was absolutely dreadful. They fear this would erase their entire moral personality. So no facts or evidence can be acknowledged as true that have come out against their narrative. But I think it's even worse than that. Because what did I see when I looked at the pictures of them tearing down, literally with their fingernails, tearing. It's a violent act. And to me, they were tearing the Jewish people out of their sight, out of their heads, and out of their consciences. They wanted us gone. They didn't want to know about Jews anymore because Jews were suddenly victims, and they cannot stand the idea of Jews as victims. Because if Jews are victims, then it makes them complicit today in the cause they support, the Palestinian cause, and it makes them collectively complicit in the great crime of the Holocaust. Even though they weren't directly involved, the West was complicit. And they can't stand it, they can't deal with it, they have to get rid of us completely from our heads. And this terrible thing that happened on October the 7th, they cannot deal with it, and they will not deal with it, and they have to literally tear it down. So that's one theory. But I think there's a deeper cause still in ideologies that have taken over Western culture, and this kind of develops what you have written in your book. Because you write about the kind of institutional onslaught from organizations like the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, the United Nations, and all that gallery of rogues. But I would say behind all that, which is absolutely correct, the ideologies that have taken over Western culture, I think, offer us clues as to why this reaction in the West to both October 7 and the war that followed has been so perverse. It's a very complicated set of issues, and I will just glancingly refer to some of the kind of highlights of this culture. But basically it's a culture which has got rid of the idea of objective truth and objective lies. It's basically a culture which has departed from the biblically based morality, which is the basis of Western civilization. And instead it has formed a whole set of beliefs which center around the individual. What the individual does and says and how the individual lives must take precedence over any kind of moral codes. So, for example, it has given rise to what's called relativism, moral relativism. What I say is right for me is what is right. I feel that you have oppressed me. Doesn't matter what the facts are. The fact that I feel you've oppressed me means you have oppressed me. What I feel is what is true. And this is basically why the West has been led to basically hell in a handcart. Because what is now balanced, because you can't choose, there's no such thing as objective truth. So you can't choose what is true. It's my opinion. I think, it's, as Oprah Winfrey famously said, my truth. My truth is as valid as your truth. So you can't tell the difference between truth and lies. It's just a matter of opinion. I say this is true, you say it's a lie. That's your opinion. That's my opinion. Who wins? Well, whoever has the power wins. So truth and lies are in the balance. Truth and lies. We have to balance truth and lies. Who is the victim, who is the victimizer? Doesn't matter. We must balance the victim and the victimizer. And this is what the BBC does. The BBC believes that it is the arbiter of balance and fairness. What does it mean by that? It means that you actually have to balance the person who is doing the murdering with the person who is being potentially murdered. And that's balance. I once said to a producer at the BBC, who was driving me completely crazy by consistently having in the studio a representative of the Hamas, in order that I should argue with him. And I said to the producer, if this was like 1936, you would have said, oh, let's have her Goebbels in so you can have a discussion with him. And that's balance. And he said, yeah, I would have done that. And that's where we've got to. This is moral relativism. No such thing as truth. No moral distinctions, because there is no truth. And so it doesn't matter who starts the war. All that matters is the dead people. It doesn't matter that Israel is actually defending itself and that the Hamas or the Hezbollah are the aggressors. It doesn't matter. Let's just look at the number of bodies that pile up. Because that's all that matters. And it doesn't matter what the numbers are, because these people are saying 41,000 of our civilians have been killed. That's good enough for us because we feel good about emoting, because my feelings trump all facts. And so this is also why we have this tit for tat. It drives me absolutely crazy. The BBC and no doubt other media outlets couch what's happening now as tit for tat. So Iran sent 108 missiles as a response to Israel killing Hassan Nasrallah. Excuse me? I mean, think back to the Second World War. That was tit for tat. Oh yeah, Britain bombed Dresden, and it was like tit for tat for the Blitz. I mean, ridiculous. It's war. But this is not understood, and this is not acknowledged. The aggressor under this ideology is always the side with power, because what we're talking about is a set of views which basically are derived from Marxism. Marxism held that all relationships are based on power. Either you have power, in which case you are an oppressor, or you don't have power, in which case you are an oppressed person. The fact that the idea you can have power and actually be a good person, no, you can't do that. Oppressor and oppressed. And this is where we get to the whole business of victim culture and intersectionality. This idea that there are groups who are oppressed and they're all basically together against the oppressor. And under this ideology, which is now standard in universities throughout the West, the Jew is the oppressor. The Jew is the oppressor. Why? Because Jews are powerful. Jews are powerful. Why? Well, because they're running everything. They're running the media. They're running the law. They're running capitalism. That is the view at the basis of intersectionality and victim culture. And there's something even worse than that. Because not only do such people who go on about, gender stuff and race stuff and heteronormative stuff and all that sort of stuff, not only do they cast the Jew as the oppressor, but they also come up with this amazing thing, which is that anti-Semitism has deprived me, as an oppressed group, of being a victim, because it sucked up all the victimhood in the world. And what do they mean by that? When you press them, they say, well, the thing about anti-Semitism is that the Jews have got away with it. And it's meant that we can't be victims anymore, because anti-Semitism is such a big thing. There's no space for us. And when you look at anti-Semitism, actually, the Jews are using this to hide their misdeeds behind this claim that they are victims. And you say, well, what are they hiding? What do you think they're hiding? And the answer is, well, all the things that we believe about them. That they are uniquely powerful, that they further their own interests to the disadvantage of everybody else, that they're rapacious, that they're cruel, all those things. But we can't say that because of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is this enormous thing which prevents us from saying these things about the Jews. However, how successful was this, they say? Anti-Semitism has meant the Jews have got away with it. We can't say any of it. So we're going to have that. We're going to have that. We're going to say that because we're victims, we cannot be held responsible for anything. So at the very heart of this victim culture is the idea that the Jew is a really bad person. And it's another extraordinary thing that all the ideologies that form part of all this all have at their heart an attack on either Judaism, the Jewish people, or the state of Israel. Moral and cultural relativism, no such thing as truth. There's fundamentally an anti-Jewish notion. Multiculturalism, the idea that you cannot ever declare your allegiance to one culture because you have to basically say that all cultures are the same as all other cultures. Again, fundamentally anti-Jew. Materialism, the idea that there's nothing in the world, the universe and beyond that can't be explained by things that actually exist. Fundamentally anti-Jew, anti-religion, and so on and so forth. And also fundamental to this is the attack on the idea of the nation state, on the basis that the nation state is the cause of nationalism, that nationalism is the source of prejudice and war. If you didn't have nationalism, you wouldn't have had Hitler. So get rid of the nation, you'll never have Hitler. Oh, here's Israel. Israel is not only a nation, it's an ethno-nation. It's a nation for a particular set of people, Jews. That is a really, really bad thing. We all believe in the brotherhood of man. And so the final thing that comes out of this is that because there is no such thing as a nation that we should support as a discrete thing, we all believe in the brotherhood of man, war is absolutely not on, at all. You cannot go to war to defend your nation. This is itself a source of kind of madness. How many times have I heard in the last year, nothing was ever solved by war? Just think about that. Just think about that. What would Churchill have said to that? Nothing is ever solved by war. But I can tell you, I've never spoken to Mr. Biden and have no wish to. And I've never spoken to members of his administration and even less wish to. But I can tell you that they would say, no. War is a really stupid idea. We have to have negotiation. We have to have compromise. And so that's why they hold Israel to this ridiculous standard that when Israel is being attacked existentially by Iran, by the Hezbollah, by the Hamas with rockets and missiles and drones and all the rest of it, the response of the United States is to say, we must redouble our attempts to get a political solution to this. And they have absolutely no idea of what it means to be a fanatic. They have no conception of the fact that if you are a fanatic, you cannot negotiate with a fanatic because a fanatic's position is non-negotiable. And if you negotiate with a fanatic, you're effectively signalling that you are surrendering. And that's the kind of pressure that America is putting on Israel at the moment. It's the kind of pressure that Britain, if it had ever had any power these days, would wish to put on Israel. It's the sort of pressure that France, Monsieur Macron, is putting on Israel. It's the same fundamental liberal Western delusion that the entire world is full of people like us, people who are governed by reason and self-interest. And consequently, everything can be negotiated and everything is a compromise. Faced with a contest between God and the devil, they will split the difference. And so this is why we have the corruption of the international institutions, the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, the United Nations. They're all based on this idea that we're all a brotherhood of man, that we do law, not war, that all conflict is open to negotiation and compromise, and so on and so forth. And finally, my absolutely final point is that, and I think this is certainly implied in your book, if not said explicitly, but there is a threat to the West from external enemies, Iran, Russia, China, North Korea. But in my view, the threat from these external enemies is made infinitely greater by the threat from within the West, caused by the fact that the West is no longer able or willing to defend itself because it will no longer even acknowledge what it's up against. So these are just a few thoughts that perhaps we can chew over.